Yeah, but would we really be able to do a lot more thinking? I mean, based on what I've read so far, we're only using a fraction of our brains, aren't we? And then,
Oh,
so having more is not necessarily better. I mean, that's also
yeah.
another argument in between species such as us and whales, for example. I mean, a whale brain is much, much bigger than my and your brain put together. Does that mean that it's smarter than both of us? I mean,
Yeah, not necessarily, obviously, but I mean, if you asked anybody, would you like to have half the number of brain cells that you've got, or twice as many? They would probably go for the twice as many options.
or
No,
more.
and then they'll go for more. I agree with you. It's not everything, but if you do have more, you can do something with them. I don't know that I agree with this thing that we only use a fraction of our brain at any one time, at any one instant. Yes, you're right. I'm not using all of my brain at the moment in any way that I could, but that's how the brain works. It generalizes. It's not, strictly speaking, a parallel processing mechanism. It's a complex network. Some of the neurons are firing at any one time. Some are sitting there having a rest, if you like. I mean, when we grow this rat brain, we can look at this under the microscope,
Yeah.
and we can see there are activities in different regions, and then some of the neurons, some of them don't seem to do a lot, but they do some things occasionally, and that's going on in our brain. So at any one time, yes, we are just using a fraction of the brain, but then some of the neurons just kick in occasionally for particular reasons. Maybe you see a very attractive woman, zing, 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 certain of the neurons start going. They've been dormant, they've been there, they've been lying there for about the last month or something like that, and suddenly they start kicking in and doing things maybe that you don't want them to do. But it's different brain cells kick in at different times. So overall, I think we do use, maybe not all, but most of our brain. So I wouldn't mind having a few extra brain cells, but where they exist is a different question. And what is their nature?
Hmm.
Maybe I would like to have a network memory that is remote, but is directly connected into my brain.
I wouldn't mind having a little more brain cells myself. And speaking of the numbers of brain cells and how intelligent AI is at the moment, for the purposes that I'm interested in with respect to a potential technological singularity, things would really start changing at the moment that AI is probably as smart as human beings and eventually much smarter than us potentially. So my question to you in that sense is, what are the benchmarks on the way? I assume you would agree that that's the goal. Equalization between the brain capacity or our intellectual capabilities between AI and humans.
Well, it's difficult because already AI is better than human intelligence in many ways,
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
obvious ways, like mathematical processing,
Logic.
logic, memory capabilities.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of ways. Dealing with multidimensionality is something. Human brain is limited to three dimensions.
Hmm.
Computers deal with hundreds. Enormous advantage. I would love to just feel what it's like to experience 4 or 5 dimensions. I can't wait for that. I have no idea. It might blow my mind, but we'll go for it. So I think already AI is better, outperforms human intelligence. So there's some overall power of intelligence, if you like, that's where you get the equalization that you're talking about. And it could be very difficult for us to decide, are we getting very close, or maybe there are simple things like the Turing test.
Do you have a new Turing test of your own, for example, or how do you
No,
gauge whether you succeeded in improving the capabilities, for example, of the brain of the rat robot compared to,
oh,
say,
yeah,
version 1.0 and version 2.0 and 3.0? How do you
yeah.
see the progress there? Do you?
It's very, very different. I mean, what I can report is 2008. So it's almost 2 years ago, October 2008, we held here in University of Reading, England, as close as we could come to trying to do the Turing test, because there are all sorts of parameters. Just as Turing had said, this is how, with lots of different investigators and machines, and this is how you must do it. We tried to get as close as we could to see where things are. And in 2008, one machine convinced essentially 25% of the investigators. They thought the machine was human. It fooled them. And Turing spoke of 30% for what it's worth. It's actually a bloody difficult thing for a machine to do. It's not just trying to fool you that you don't know. It's trying to fool you into thinking it is human, and the human it is up against is a machine.
Yeah.
And it's a double foot. So it's actually a very, very difficult task. And the point is, we're getting to the stage now where machines are getting very, very close. Partly it's that we haven't had an official Turing test, I think, since then in the world. So we don't really now. Maybe machines would do it, which to me says, all right, we're getting to the stage where machines of that type can fool you. You don't know, is it a human, is it a machine? We then throw in some of the mathematics and memories, and even now we're starting to get into a danger zone, maybe being sucked into a vortex towards the singularity. I don't know if Ray Kurzweil has talked of a vortex towards the singularity. He probably will now, but I think we could be getting into that sort of cone that we're sucked in and there's no way back. So I know there is the singularity. We're not there yet, but the next step before that is getting into being sucked into this vortex where we can't get out of the singularity. It's going to happen whether we like it or not. And
so are we inside of the vortex right now, or we're just at the event horizon?
I think we're at the event horizon. And maybe things like the Turing test I see as being yes, now we're in the vortex.
Pushover.
With unless we start running like mad in the opposite direction, which no way are we going to do that. We're going through it, and it's just a matter of time, and how long are we going to take to get through it? We don't know.
Yeah, speaking of running into the other direction, there's some very notable people who have voiced actual or potential opposition to it, and very violent scenarios in response to the birth of AI or potential birth of AI. So, for example, one of them, if I remember, is Hugo de Garis, who wrote about the Artilect War. Another one of all people is, for example, Richard Clarke, the former anti-terrorist czar of the US, who wrote a book called Breakpoint, in which, interestingly, sort of new Luddite medievalists of all sorts, from all kinds of religious backgrounds, fundamentalist religious backgrounds, such as Christian, Muslim, Jewish, and so on, and other extremists, sort of gathered together in opposition to any such technological advancement. Not only AI, but also genetics, defeating aging, cybernetics, or the cyborgization of the human, and so on and so on. So how do you see the potential of conflict and maybe even very sharp divisions within our own species, as people who are transhumanists like you and me potentially, or post-humanists, in support of the research and strong believers that it has to be done and it would lead us to a better life and everything positive, and then on opposing us, I don't want to call them nihilists, but at least they're new Luddite medievalists who sort of want to stop time.
I think Hugo referred to them as the Terrans, the
Terrans.
people that
yeah, that's right.
The Earth as they are. I mean, it's a very good way of describing them. I mean, I really feel pushing ahead with the technology. It's going to get to a stage before too long where the Terrans, well, there's no point. You know, they're not going to have any power to do anything about it. I don't think, again, we're at that stage yet, because intelligence is the key element. With intellectual capability, and Nietzsche spoke of this, pure philosophy, man and the Superman. How do humans treat cows or sheep? If a cow came into the room now and started saying moo, 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 I'm not going to stop talking to you and say, oh yeah, I've got to, and say, yes, I will do what you want to the cow. Of course, we'll might shoot the cow and we will eat it or something like that. And and that's really how I view the Terrans or the fundamental religious people. Not to eat them, I don't mean, and shoot them, but but the point of view that if they came into the room in a few years' time and started saying, you can't do this, you can't do that,